Welcome to Vigilant News. This is Justin here, and I'm joined by my co-host, of course, Ryan. Ryan, how's it going?
Terrific, Justin. Happy to be here. Happy to be interviewing Simon and his lovely wife.
That's right. Simon, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's going all right. Just living in a dictatorship, but we're doing okay. Living pretty free regardless.
Well, at least he's carrying on the family tradition, right?
He is.
So Simon, tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you guys are all about.
Right. So I'm currently working as a truth teller, and my medium a lot of the time right now is comedy. So I'm creating a lot of sketch comedy that drops bread pills into it. I've been a comedian and a theater maker for a long time, and I've recently transitioned into making a lot more truth-telling comedy. So I have a comedy special on Rise TV called Theorize about Conspiracies. And that was a big project that I recently released, and it really is super Canadian. So I went around Toronto, connecting areas of Toronto to different conspiracies and different elements of the New World Order. And it's been interesting having just done that and spent some time through this summer going around Toronto and making those connections. And now I really see a lot of those New World Order plans playing out around me in real time. It's been a pretty fascinating experience. So that's a lot of what I'm focusing on right now. Amanda and I, we recently started Good Resonance Wellness. So we work in the health space as well. Amanda works a lot with essential oils.
Yeah. So a lot of, just like wellness around oils. And of course, we're unschooling our kids as well. So a lot of this is just
critical
schooling. And teaching as we go. So
yeah, and we've spent a lot of time using this to teach our kids about, sovereign thinking, freedom, like government, tyranny, like how you bring these concepts to kids, right? And a big part of their homeschooling is seeing me shoot comedy sketches and seeing the way I interpret things and watching me make characters and watching me reflect the news narrative in comedy. So for them, they've started to memorize some of the sketches and some of the characters, and they're running around chasing each other with fake vaccines, and
that's great. That's good.
It's fascinating, and it's really all been very rewarding in terms of choosing unschooling from the beginning. So it wasn't really a reactive thing for us. We were parents who knew that was the way from the beginning. And as the education system here fell apart due to COVID and what they were really doing to the children, it reinforced that choice, tenfold. So that's been a really interesting thing, like watching the way they react to all this and watching how they interpret it. So, a huge amount of our time and energy is poured into transforming this entire experience for our children.
It's one of the most important things you can do right now, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, that's great. And, I've seen a lot of your work, Simon. You do great stuff. So I think it's all going to be really good. So, one of the reasons that we wanted to do this is because, as we're going to speak to here, what's actually happening in Canada and what we see in the media, even in Canadian media, is totally different than the reality. And just before the show, you were taking some time to show us a little bit of what you discovered, and it's pretty striking. So, we could cover a lot of stuff. Let's just start at the beginning. Like, what are some of the things that you think people aren't seeing that they should see?
Well, of course, the initial disinformation about the Freedom Convoy was, number one, that it was a fringe minority. So that this was a very small and insignificant, relatively extreme group of Canadians that did not by any means represent a significant portion of the population. So that was the initial form of disinformation. And then they built upon that, saying that it's also racist. It's also connected to white supremacy and Nazism. So they created that disinformation. But there was an immediate response to that, especially on social media, really reflecting the true character of the convoy. So, for example, there's an account on Instagram, I think it's called POC Freedom Convoy, and it's literally people of color supporting the convoy. And it's all videos and photos of people sharing their message, people of color sharing their message to support the convoy, and really just blowing up this narrative that it's all just white supremacists. And then the other element of this that they tried to spin was that it was anti-vax. And so one of the things that people are definitely not seeing in the mainstream media is that a number of the truckers themselves are vaccinated. And then, of course, lots of the protesters there are vaccinated. And so this is really anti-mandate. So if you really track the fake news from the beginning of this, what you'll see is that they tried to say it was a fringe minority. That failed because convoys popped up all over Canada, eventually spilling onto the borders and creating some of the blockades there. You had thousands of people turning out on the highways to cheer on the convoys as they arrived. And then once the arrival actually occurred in Ottawa, you even had fact checkers admitting that it was up to 18,000 people. So you really you had the news trying to create these fake narratives, and then the public pushing back with social media and them having to shift it and eventually admit, okay, yes, it is thousands of people. It's not a couple hundred trucks, like we said. Okay, yes, it's anti-mandate, not anti-vaccine. And so you have the media conceding that, but then at the same time, Justin Trudeau has held a hard line on his talking points, and that's really been they're anti-science, they're Nazis, they're white supremacists. We've seen him just lie over and over again.
Didn't he say that to a Jewish woman? Like, you're supporting Nazis.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Stands on the side of Nazis.
Yep. Yeah, that went viral, and it's very interesting. I've been tracking some people's response to that, and they don't really have a rebuttal. Like on the left, they don't have a rebuttal to that. All they say is, "Oh, it was shared on American conservative media, so it's not really legitimate." And that's about all they can say, right?
Yes, I saw
Easy.
that.
Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah. And that's been a big part of the narrative too, that the American influence is one of the main reasons this happened, that this is an American funded insurrection. So they basically spun the amount of donations that came through initially GoFundMe and then Give, Send, Go, saying, look at how much of this is from Americans. This is extreme right-wing Americans funding an insurrection in Canada's capital.
But they saw that wasn't true, because once they actually, sort of legally obtained all this information, they found out that the majority of donations are from Canadians. So that also was not true. There was millions from the US and other countries, but it still predominantly was Canadian money. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, of course, the response to that, having gotten to the point where Trudeau has invoked this Emergencies Act, is now to just start freezing Canadians' account. Anyone who donated to the truckers is being investigated. They're having their accounts frozen. And, a lot of people probably watching from outside Canada, but even some people in Canada don't realize that Trudeau has called this Emergencies Act, but it's still being debated in Parliament. Or did they come to a conclusion? Do you know?
they were voting at 8:00 tonight.
Yeah.
So like an hour ago. I don't know. I haven't looked, but
Voting on the status of whether it's actually an emergency or not?
Let's see.
Whether they can invoke the Emergencies Act at all.
so
Oh, really?
basically, yeah. So all the action they've taken so far has been before they even voted if they should enact it. So I'm not sure how that works, but so it's probably going to go through. I haven't looked.
Yeah.
But I think it's just
Not very hopeful about it, because the Canadian political system has really offered nothing but a uniparty during the entire COVID pandemic. Like they've been in lockstep. There's been no federal opposition to lockdowns, passports, nothing, absolutely zero, just crickets. Now you start to see now that Trudeau's gone really far, you've seen some politicians like Pierre Poilievre and some on that level of politics starting to say something. But during the entire pandemic, we've had nothing but local sort of municipal representatives speaking out, just a handful of them. So we don't feel hopeful that on the federal level they'll vote against this, because they've been in kind of lockstep this entire time anyways.
I see. Well, we got some breaking news. Didn't you just find out that?
Well, this is coming out of Wall Street Journal that they voted to extend the emergency powers for the Freedom Convoy.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we're seeing is Trudeau's grab to make this permanent, and he's alluded to as much. He's stated that what we've learned from the donation of foreign funds means that we now need to make sure that all crowdfunding goes through the federal government. So now any crowdfunding from outside Canada has to be funneled through the federal government. It all has to be checked and sort of spied upon, basically. So if Canadians want, what's that?
What could go wrong?
Yeah,
I know, eh? Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the things that he's stating. He wants to make a permanent law, even if they lift the Emergency Measures Act. They're also saying they want to do a lockdown on the internet. Basically, they're saying that, misinformation has been so harmful and so rampant during the convoy that they're going to have to look at being more controlling on, influencers. That's one of the things they've stated they're going to do in terms of going after supporters next. They're saying that now, in addition to people who donated, we're going to start looking into online influencers who helped the Freedom Convoy do what they did, or helped create this illegal occupation, as they're calling it. So they're really escalating as quickly as they can. And there seems to be, this is a really big and panicked power grab on Trudeau's part. And it seems like this is something he probably had planned all along, but that now he's having to rush because it's either now or never.
right.
They're even going after pets, I hear.
Yeah. Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, like what is it, 8 days you have to get your pet. If you don't, at your expense, mind you, from one of these detention centers, then I forget the word, but it was a euphemism for killing your pet, basically.
So this is another thing to talk about in terms of what they're really up to. A lot of what they've said are hollow threats. So they threatened to take away children, but to my knowledge, no children got taken away. They threatened to take away pets. That didn't happen. They threatened mass arrests. The majority of the arrests, people have either been released without charges or they've been just given mischief charges. Now, this is patently absurd because when you think about the fact that they called an emergency order, the Canada's War Measures Act, okay, this is something that was only used during like world wars. They call this, they say that there's like terrorism in the capital, basically, but everyone they arrest, they just charge with mischief. So there's no treason, right? There's no like
terrorism. Sedition. There were, even as of last night when I checked, there were no firearms offenses, no assaults, no property damage. Like mischief is like, I guess, in the realm. You could say property damage is mischief. But again, they're very low level offenses. Like, yes, you can be put in jail for 10 years on mischief, but it's quite extreme. Like, that's not really a common thing you see. So it's usually like, yeah, property damage. Like when Black Lives Matter toppled over a statue in Montreal and took the head off, they got mischief charges.
Got it.
So it's stuff like that. And even we know there's less done here. So they said that they destroyed the war memorial and like tarnished it. And that's just not true. And so even the convoy organizers just simply getting mischief charges, or not even necessarily mischief themselves. I can't remember all the charges for them, but some of them only got sort of inciting mischief, so like encouraging others to do so. And but none of but people are still sort of screaming that it's an insurrection. So
right.
And interestingly, you also have Trudeau's former sniper. He worked professionally guarding Justin Trudeau as his sniper. He quit on Trudeau based on the mandate. He ended up siding with the Freedom Convoy. And so he's been a part of this. He saw on the media that they were calling for his arrest. So he walked up to a line of police officers and said, "Go ahead, arrest me. I'm here. I hear on the media you're looking for me." They arrested him, released him with no charges. So there's a lot of feeder, a lot of empty threats going on here. It's really Trudeau trying to seem scary. Sure, it is scary that people's bank accounts have been frozen. At the same time, I've seen truckers say, yeah, my bank account got frozen. But I also have had people walk up to us and we've been given over $100,000 in cash to make sure we're okay. People immediately found ways to get them money. So, right. The kind of support that they have is undying at this point. So, these people were upset about tyranny and Trudeau responded with more tyranny. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, a principle of history and laws, it's not what actually happens that's important with respect to affecting societal change. It's what you can get people to believe. And what we're seeing now is a situation just like we saw in other times in history where the media paints a picture and that first impression is the one that sticks in people's heads. The correction doesn't come, if it comes at all, until much later, and people don't usually pay attention, but they've already invested themselves in whatever the suggestion is by the government. And, you know, we also know that totalitarian regimes manufacture or use crises to their advantage to impose all sorts of emergency measures, and then the emergency measures never go away. As a matter of fact, according to some of the things I've seen, General Order 100, which is the order that Lincoln issued, which was the first executive order in history, apparently, is still in effect to this day. And that, you know, we're like almost 200 years out from the Civil War at this point, or like 150 or so. So it seems like that's the same thing. I'm inclined to agree that maybe Trudeau planned this, but I think what they are is they're more like O plans. They have a specific agenda they're trying to get to, but they'll take any road that they can use to get there. And the truckers supplied them with another crisis that they can use to their advantage. So would you say that, because it seems like based on what you just said, that there's a lot more grassroots support than, you know, people not believing in this? Is it really like an overwhelming majority of people do support the Freedom Convoy up there, or is it much less than that? What are your thoughts?
So from a political perspective, yes, absolutely. Right. If we look at percentages, Trudeau is in power with about 20% of the voting population here in Canada. So that gives you a sense of how fractured and broken the voting system here is. I'll also note that Trudeau ran on not his recent election, but the one before that. Part of his platform was election reform, which once he got into office, he just said, I'm not going to do it. So he left it as is. So Trudeau has this 20% of the voting population supporting him. And polls here have shown, and these are mainstream polls, that about a third of Canadians support the Freedom Convoy, which is larger, right? And in fact, makes it the largest political party, if you want to give it that term, in Canada right now. So if there were to be an election and supporters of the truckers actually voted, they would certainly overwhelm Trudeau's current minority government.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, that is very encouraging. So it sounds like a large portion of the people have seemingly been red pilled by this whole thing. I mean, let's speak a little bit to prior to this happening. When you would bump into people on the street, you'd go to buy eggs, you know, these kind of things. What was the sentiment? Were people just like drinking the Kool-Aid, or was this an undercurrent that just kind of boiled over once this freedom protest happened?
I mean, I think there's been a lot of people silent.
I think there's a lot of silent, masked people. Like, I have had just a few people personally come to us in our community and be like, thank you for not wearing masks. Like, you're sort of, I look up to you one day. And like, there's people are very, and then when you talk to them and when you make a safe space for them to just say, they're like, no, I don't want to do this. Like, this is a nightmare. So I do think there is a huge movement. And I think even the creator of the Freedom Convoy account himself eventually showed his identity and was like, I'm a real estate agent. And I just realized that I've still been hiding, and it's time to show ourselves and realize that we are quite a huge number of population. So I think that's why everyone was crying at the videos and the support that these truckers had going over every overpass across Canada, and just having thousands of people cheering you. It was like, well, these people are, some of them are vaxxed, like, and it's not about that. It's just the unity and the support to like be free of these restrictions.
Yeah, like we've been standing up against this for the majority of it. You know, like personally, I've been shopping without a mask in our neighborhood this entire time, and I've been, you know, one of the only people in our neighborhood doing it. And so it's interesting for us because we eventually hooked up with some homeschooling community members here. Nice. And you know, one of the great things was that we started creating these networks of families that were, you know, coming out of the school system. So they had been responding to all of this, and they had emerged from the school system, pulled their kids out, started homeschooling, and they connected with us. But, you know, these are people who are awake to what's going on, but we're still, so a lot of them were still masking and you know, participating in that aspect of it. And a couple of them, at least I spoke to, they said, since the convoy, we have outright refused masking now permanently. Whereas before we were still sort of doing it here and there. Yeah. And now they're like, no, now I see we're deeply supported. And, you know, we experienced this, and many people experienced this that we spoke to. it was hard to not just weep openly at these videos of the truckers headed to Ottawa. It was extremely motivating and uplifting. And for me personally, I think it's the most patriotism I've ever felt in my whole life. Hands down. Hands down.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we're Americans, so we're supposed to be like blood boiling over patriotism everywhere. But I'm seeing more patriotism and willing to dedicate people to the cause of freedom up, above us in the country above us in Canada than I have even in the Americans I see around me. And that's saying a lot because we do have a lot of patriotic Americans here.
Well, it's strange. The ratio of mask wearers to non-mask wearers when I go to the grocery store around here is probably close to 50-50 nowadays, maybe less, more like 60-40 at this point. It seems like there's been a shift since the beginning of the year where COVID's kind of done for a lot of people. At least it seems like that here.
Yeah.
And now it's interesting for us. Like, we live in a place that's pretty dense with
we got reported today by customers.
So for example, we went to Whole Foods and I don't know, some kind of Karen reported us in real time to the staff there, made a complaint and asked the staff to come and confront us because we're there with our kids.
Which they hadn't done. We walked freely. It was fine. Nobody said anything, but a customer complained. And she had to. She's like, I'm sorry, ma'am. I just had to. A customer complained. I was like, it's fine.
Did you have to put on a mask afterwards, or were you like, thanks?
No, I was like, no,
we're exempt. That's just it. We're exempt and it's over. There's no other conversation to have. I
responded partially because I'm used to like deflecting, but she was like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, it's okay. It's not you. It's
Right.
It's interesting, and that brings us to some of the stuff we wanted to talk about, because being in Toronto, there's a unique sort of bubble of information, right? You have the localized fake news. And so we've been watching this pretty carefully, and they have shown how scared they are of any kind of uprising here in Toronto. They've been in an absolute panic to squash any expression of the Freedom Convoy here. And so one of the first things we noticed was a fake news story about healthcare workers here. And I just... Justin, I sent you the most recent video I sent you.
Okay.
If we want to bring that up.
Not the woman getting trampled, something else.
So something just after that, yep.
Just that. Okay, hold on, let me pull it up here. Here it is. Okay. Give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen.
So I'll give a little context while Justin's looking that up. This is on February 4th. So Amanda and I we took a video of our TV because it's actually, they tend to scrub what they put live or make it really difficult to find what the live news broadcast was. So this is on February 4th, around 9 or 10 p.m. And this is the way that they're reporting on the news locally with Global Toronto. And so what's interesting here is that we're gonna hear them talk about this whole narrative about how the Freedom Convoy protesters are affecting the healthcare network. Here we go.
Okay.
-14, Jesus.
There's a major concern about healthcare workers and people seeking care in Toronto, where it's feared that there could be a scene similar to the one in Ottawa, just blocks from Queen's Park, where protests are set to take place this weekend for some of the city's major hospitals. Karen Lieberman picks up the story there.
Their child is coming for a bone marrow biopsy at Sick Kids. Their mother is coming for her third line of chemotherapy at Princess Margaret Hospital. This is, for many people, the worst day of their life.
Emergency physician Dr. Raghu Venugopal is bracing for what could be coming to Hospital Row this weekend after watching, like so many others, the scene in Ottawa over the last week. He's hoping protesters who will gather nearby at Queen's Park hear this message.
People are cared for with professionalism, with kindness, and with expertise. People's vaccination status does not get in the way of our human touch with people. And so we would ask that same courtesy to be extended by protesters.
In a memo sent by the University Health Network, a reference to Toronto police suggesting, out of an abundance of caution, that healthcare staff not wear clothing that may identify them as hospital workers. This wouldn't be the first time a crowd protesting vaccines or vaccine mandates gathers along University Avenue. This was the scene in September. Dr. Venugopal was here then too.
This is a place where people come to get healed, where people are sick.
He will once again take to the streets this weekend with a group of healthcare providers. The message: Healthcare should never be compromised.
They're way over the top, these guys. Going way too far.
This couple is hopeful access to hospitals will not be impacted as they head for her cancer treatment.
There are lines that need to be drawn around places like hospitals and houses of worship and schools and places that really need to be unconditionally safe.
For the sake of patient care and those providing it.
It only adds more and more stress and anxiety to an already exhausting workforce.
Public health student Kelty Hamilton is organizing safe walks.
We know that some people might feel comfortable with a walking buddy just to go to and from work if you're a healthcare worker or worker downtown.
Petula Neal, thankful for the healthcare workers who cared for her father while he battled COVID-19, launched a GoFundMe to raise funds to help hospital staff get to work safely.
Makes me really concerned that they're going to have to worry about their safety heading to work this weekend.
Karen Lieberman, Global.
Wow.
Yeesh.
Give me a break. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Psychological manipulation right there.
Yeah.
This is a
So
pretty
good.
incredible fake news story. So you'll see in there, Justin, I have a tweet that I sent you from Toronto Police.
Okay.
This is really important. So you'll see in there, they said that the University Healthcare Network sent out a memo claiming that police told them that healthcare workers should not wear their scrubs in public, right? Yeah, you'll see it. It says Toronto Police.
Okay. Let me see if I can find it. You sent me a whole bunch, so I'm not sure if this is the one you're talking about.
That's not the one.
No. Okay. Let's see.
It says to clarify some commentary today.
Okay. Let's see.
There it
Here
is.
we
There
go.
it is. Okay, so as you can see, to clarify some commentary today, we would not direct healthcare staff on whether or not to wear uniforms. Healthcare workers remain a priority for the Toronto Police, and officers will be present around hospitals this weekend to ensure they feel safe and going to and from work. So the email going out to the University Healthcare Network, this is pretty startling because that is the entire network of hospitals across.
It's like 20,000 healthcare workers.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So an email got sent out with a fake police statement to 20,000 healthcare workers in Toronto. Of course, this terrified them because it implied that Freedom Convoy protesters are angry with healthcare workers to the extent that they need to hide their identities in public because they might be attacked.
Wow.
So this Toronto Police tweet, they then had to go and retweet this to numerous mainstream media outlets on Twitter to try and correct them spreading this story.
But the kicker is that a lot of these, people whose minds aren't really quite well, or left-wing people, are now saying that the police are lying, and that it's the police are the ones that are lying in this scenario. And it's true, the email that they got, so they're basically, saying, sort of confronting the police and saying, oh, so you didn't say for people to not.
Which is a conspiracy theory. Incredibly, it's a conspiracy theory that the police are now lying and that they did, in fact, send this unconfirmed
and then
statement.
lied about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then lied about it.
So
Right.
this gets even deeper because, as I said, that the video we showed was a news broadcast that went out on February 4th that we watched around 9 or 10 p.m. So you'll see, Justin, I sent you a link that's global news at 5:30 in Toronto.
Yeah, I got that. Okay, let me pull it up.
Okay, so this is pretty incredible because you cannot find the newscast we just showed you that we recorded on our TV anywhere on the Global News website. But on this one, they basically, they tell the same story, but then they admit that there is a correction and that the police stated that they did not, in fact, share this news. They did not make a statement about healthcare workers needing to wear different uniforms. Do we want to play some of that clip?
Tracy, back to you.
Right, still very fluid there. Thank you, Sean. And there are concerns those gathering this weekend could target healthcare workers making their way to nearby Hospital Row. Our Karen Lieberman is covering that part of the story. Karen, what are they being told?
Yeah, Tracy, healthcare workers have been briefed by their hospital employers, and certainly we spoke with patients today who are all well aware of what could be in store for this area over the weekend. Now, the concern is that, as Sean was reporting, this whole entire area may be closed off, but the worry is that there will still be disruption, and this is considered critical grounds for healthcare in this city. Now, also the concern is that they could be facing intimidation. We know that there was a memo that's been circulating by the University Health Network to its staff indicating that Toronto police had been suggesting, out of an abundance of caution, that healthcare workers not wear clothing that would ID them as hospital workers as they head to and from work. There's been a bit of confusion because since then, Toronto police also tweeted that they hadn't directed staff to do that. Either way, I could tell you this is a tense time here on Hospital Row for patients, for frontline healthcare workers. We spoke with an emergency physician who is working tonight, will be working over the weekend. He acknowledges that people have the right to protest, but he hopes that they're courteous while doing so.
So it's pretty incredible, because what it looks like is that they're pretending that a correction went out on this, when in fact the news broadcast we watched was hours after the 5:30 news. And I think, you know, you were looking at some of the things on Twitter with this as well, like the way that people were responding to this. One of the doctors you were following was creating, you know, you had a lot of really scared healthcare workers.
No kidding.
So predominantly, again, like when you send 20,000 healthcare workers this inflammatory email, they all take to Twitter. And of course, I follow a lot of these, like, really the doctors in Toronto who have influence, who are part of the narrative, and they immediately started inflaming. They would screenshot the email and post it to their Twitter and then start inflaming everyone. So it wasn't long before everyone in the community was getting inflamed.
Of course. And, you know, psychologically, just to speak to psychological manipulation, when you produce somebody a visceral fear experience, which is what happened to these healthcare workers, they're going to be so identified with that emotional reaction that, you know, the hand of God could come down and tell them that it was fake news, and they probably still believe what they were told, because you got personal investment through emotional potency, and then social validation, because everybody in the neighborhood, in their social clique, these healthcare workers, is like, oh, wow, isn't that crazy? So, you know, again, first impressions.
Yeah, exactly. It's very important, the first impression.
There seems to be an actual system in place with Global News in which they will go back, and it's very 1984, right? Like, they rewrite history.
Yeah.
They pretend this newscast they put out that really terrorized the public, right? Like, it created this sentiment across Toronto that there's these extremists building up in our streets that want to attack healthcare workers. And this was built upon another false news narrative that they released in September of 2021 that, again, stated that there was protests threatening healthcare workers. And in fact, the protest they were referring to was organized by Canada's frontline nurses, which is made up of healthcare workers who were literally protesting outside the Nurses College and different hospitals here in Toronto, talking about the fact that the mandate, that they stand against the mandate and that it's unjust, and that they're not anti-vaccine, they're just anti-mandate. So you have this theme, right, of anti-mandate people being called dangerous, anti-science, and being told that they're a threat. You know, now I didn't realize this was going to happen when I was just looking this up tonight. And now I realize that if I don't record the live broadcast on my TV, there might be something totally different on the internet when you go to see what the broadcast was.
Wow. Just the level of gaslighting. I mean, it's pretty remarkable how brazen they are with all of this. And, you know, and is it just you guys, or is anybody else seeing the writing on the wall with this, or?
I think it's pretty heavy to go through. Like, sometimes it's a lot to sift through. So a lot of people, I think, get it from like, we're resources in a lot of ways. But there is a growing community of people who are more conspiratorial now than they weren't interested in this. Like, I know many of my family members and friends who would just, you know, not even think in this way, and now are starting to question a lot of what they see.
Yeah, you can't hide from it anymore. It doesn't seem like.
Yeah, like
there's
there's
too much to ignore.
The journalist from the National Post, you know, that's been a very interesting story.
There's a journalist from the National Post, which is a newspaper here, and she lives downtown Ottawa. So she started just going every day out to the Convoy and reporting on what was going on. And now she's being attacked, of course, because what she reported is not what they want. So all the people on the social media are attacking her. But she's really come to be in this place of understanding that none of this was violent. None of this was an attempt to overthrow the government. And she lived there. So there are many people coming forward who live there and who own businesses there and who were like, I had no issues. Like, in fact, my business boomed with people. And that was another one we saw as well, where a business that was serving the Convoy protesters yesterday were being threatened by police to let them in and to stop, basically to try to shut down their business.
So they're retroactively trying to punish businesses that supported the truckers while they were here. There's police now banging on their door saying you need to shut down your whole business.
They wouldn't let them in, thankfully, but they said they were like doing an inspection, and they're like, no, on a Sunday, you're not doing an inspection, and you're also threatening to break the window if you don't let us in. So it's very, very extreme. That was after all the trucks were out of Ottawa as well. So at this point, it's like, what are you doing?
Didn't they punish the small businesses enough for the last 2 years?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what people are saying. They're like, well, it's okay for you to punish small businesses, but not peaceful protest, because they're upset with horns honking.
And the punishment is totally unfounded. I mean, I'm not there, so I'll turn it to you guys. Have you heard any reports of businesses being broken into, taken advantage of? Is any crime, anything like that happening?
One, but it was actually the opposite. So since they disclosed all of the names of the people who've donated, I believe she donated $50 or $100, a gelato shop downtown Ottawa, who was just, of course, doing really well and got exposed. And then the death threats came towards her, and they hung a banner on her shop, and she was just in tears. Like,
what did she donate? $50?
$50 or $100, I think.
Yeah.
So, and then of course the guy that got run over in Manitoba, there was also, of course, freedom protests all across Canada. And in Manitoba, an Antifa member hit and run a protester as well.
No, multiple protests. Okay, so this is another really interesting example. So Reuters reported that on the whole convoy, and Reuters put a statement in one of their articles on the Freedom Convoy that alluded that the hit and run in Winnipeg had something to do with the Freedom Convoy. And literally it was the opposite. It was a left-wing, like Antifa person who was driving alone, masked, of course, who actually hit these Freedom Convoy protesters. And so Reuters literally spun it so it looked like the opposite of what really, really happened. And, I think that's really important in this broader context of mainstream news, because Reuters is rated as the top. In their whole system of news, it's supposed to be the most factual, least biased news you can get. And here you have them openly lying. Another lie that they promoted was when Elon Musk tweeted in support of the Freedom Convoy, Reuters wrote up a huge article trying to frame Elon Musk as anti-vax and then saying that's why he's supporting the convoy, when the truth is that Elon Musk tweeted that him and his family are fully vaccinated. So they omitted that from their article, tried to make him seem anti-vax, to spin it again to make it seem like an anti-vax protest, which number one wasn't true because Elon Musk is not anti-vax, but number two, there's plenty of messaging coming from the movement saying that there are vaccinated people standing with unvaccinated people on this issue.
Wow, no kidding. Yeah. Well, I mean, this just goes to show you how powerful somebody who actually cares about the truth and is willing to do something about it is. Because for these people who go to the Freedom Convoy, they're actually boots on the ground trying to speak to issues they care about. And the whole massive global media machine has to work overtime to try to suppress just the truth of this. And it's not really working. I mean, people are getting red pill all over the place.
It seems like the biggest enemy is just fear itself. And the government's kind of like, doing what it can, but it's really just driving fear as its main, artillery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, the landscape in Ottawa has been an interesting thing to watch, compared to the way they've done fake news and policing here in Toronto. We've been watching the police situation evolve in Ottawa, and that's a huge, interesting drama in and of itself.
Would you say that, have you interacted with any police officers in Toronto? Did they share any opinions or anything like that?
We haven't personally, but we went downtown today. We really wanted to see what the downtown was like, and we were there today. And, ironically, what they've done here in Toronto, again, there's a big panic to stop this. So they preemptively created blockades across the whole city, all the core streets
Most
in the
of
downtown.
downtown is locked off.
Just
you
to
can
make sure.
You can walk through, but they said that they're preventing like trucks and cars from going through.
But the way they've done it is with trucks. So now
they've used trucks to block.
now you have a blockade of city trucks lining Toronto, shutting down, like, you know, foot traffic for businesses. They shut down the highways into the city on the weekends to stop convoys from coming.
Outrageous.
So they have punished the economy of Toronto because they're so terrified of what happened in Ottawa happening here. So now, you know, you go downtown Toronto and it was at like Bloor and where was it? Queen's Park. Bloor and Queen's Park is lined with City of Toronto trucks to stop trucks.
Unbelievable.
Wow, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, the very thing that they're all up in arms about, which is blocking the economy, increasing the costs to families, blah, 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 all the stuff that Trudeau spouted the other day, they're literally doing right now as a protective measure.
It makes you wonder if it's going to be like when the People's Convoy leaves Barstow and starts, you know.
Yeah, no kidding.
They've already released their itinerary and where they're going. So it's just, you know, I'm sure the same thing will pop up around the US too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're going to try to fan the flames of, you know, this is another January 6th insurrection, these kind of things. So,
They don't look like they're going to let go of this power anytime soon. And, you know, what they have right now is a corrupt police force willing to do their bidding. And this has been a pretty crazy thing to watch. So, you know, we wanted to get into a bit of a timeline on the policing in Ottawa because this has been like
the misinformation that they are now
incredible
participating in.
Well, so to give a bit of backstory, you know, you had the original police chief who was running the police department in Ottawa. Slowly, as I believe his name, right? So there was there was the drama with the passport going on within the Ottawa Police Department, sort of leading up to all this. So interestingly, the Ottawa Police Department actually is one of the police departments in Canada that fought against the vaccine passport for the longest. And so you had the president of the police union in Ottawa who went on CTV News and said, we're not doing this. These mandates are draconian. He was very, very firm, and he managed to fight for quite a while to make it so that unvaccinated police officers in Ottawa could just test every 2 days and didn't have to get the passport. But of course, after immense public pressure, so that the fake news doing article after article on how dangerous and wild it is that there isn't a passport in place for the Ottawa Police Service, they pressured. And so the police chief at the time, he eventually succumbed to that pressure. He said, fine, we'll go all the way. And they have until the end of January to get their vaccines or they'll be sent home, which is, of course, what happened. The president of the police union, he stuck to his guns the whole way. He never backed off from that stance. So interestingly, he was standing up for a minority of the Ottawa police officers by saying these passports are tyrannical. So on January 29th, the passport kicked in for Ottawa police. And then 4 days later, Ottawa is descended upon by thousands of people echoing exactly what the president of the police union in Ottawa said, which is these are tyrannical mandates. We're against this. And so it's so interestingly, it's just almost poetic that the vaccine passport for the police in Ottawa kicked in right as the convoy was arriving. And so you had this whole shift in the culture there. Now, what ended up happening was that Trudeau wanted the police there to get really aggressive right away. And the police chief there would not succumb to that. And so he ended up stepping down and basically getting the rest of his salary and walking away from this whole thing because he wouldn't do what they were asking, or so it seems.
Wow.
And then you had basically a Karen counselor in the Ottawa on the Ottawa Board of Councillors there. She bypassed the normal rules for putting a new police chief in, put someone in without the proper authority or without any challenge, is the way they put it. This police chief had no one challenging him. So this person got put in. He hadn't policed for 8 years. So he was out of the whole loop anyways. This counselor ended up getting let go. Then they got a new guy who finally stepped in, which is the police chief, the acting police chief, who's now running this huge violent crackdown on the protesters in Ottawa. So what it seems is they struggled. They struggled to get someone authoritarian enough to do Trudeau's bidding.
Yeah, it's true, because even the one that they tried to push through, he backed out. He's like, he wrote a letter that was publicly published, and he said, in light of everything that's gone on in the last 2 days, like, I'm not going to take this position. Like,
wow.
So that's why it took so long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they found someone, and then people were also saying, like, there's no evidence of this, but you know, there's lots of officers that have been apparently refusing to go, because officers have gone all around Canada. So from all the provinces, and even Quebec is quite intense. We know they're almost like military level police. So when everyone knew that the Quebec police were there, they're the ones in the green uniforms with their name badges blurred out, so they can't see who they are, and they don't, you know, there's no evidence of sort of getting who they are. Although they do have numbered helmets, but
we don't know what that means yet. We just know that they
levels of policing across the country, of course.
They stitched black patches over top of where their badge numbers should be.
Mm-hmm.
And there's numerous photos showing that these cops that have no identity are on the front of the line a lot of the time. They're the most aggressive. They're the ones aggressing a lot of the time. Not that there aren't also Ottawa police and Vancouver police and Toronto police. You have to realize they've called in police forces from around the whole country.
RCMP,
so
as well.
Every police force in the country has taken a portion of their officers and sent them to Ottawa to create this army, basically, to descend on these protesters. So
troops or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, so that's actually interesting. Jordan Sather actually did a bit of digging on that, and there was some speculation that they're UN troops because people did find footage of UN planes landing in North Bay, Ontario. However, it turns out that this is an airport that has an ongoing contract with UN planes landing there. So it really wouldn't be out of the norm for a UN plane to be there. Doesn't mean there isn't a UN presence. We really don't know. But some of the stuff circulating on social media with those videos are just showing an airport that normally would have UN planes anyway. So it's not really, it doesn't really back it up.
Just speculate.
But we'll see, you know, because we know that Agenda 2030, it does state that there's an intention to replace, you know, police forces within nation states with UN officers. So we know there is a written stated intention to move things in this direction towards a new world order, towards a globalized government, so that government could, you know, police nations as they please. So I think that's one of the valid reasons why why people have those concerns, because it is in numerous agendas. Doesn't, you know, we don't know yet, but the fact of the matter is, whatever police they have there, they've been willing to do the bidding of Trudeau at this point. And now what we're seeing is a massive disinformation campaign that has come directly from the Ottawa police. They've been tweeting disinformation in real time as the protests are unfolding. And now we also see, of course, the news media working to support the fake news narrative that the police were creating in real time. So this was kind of shocking for us because we were, you know, we had 2 or 3 live streaming at a time. You know, we had like 3 devices going. We were watching screen recording lives. Like, we really wanted to make sure we watched this in real time. And so we were watching the Ottawa police tweet lies about what was happening in real time. And so they would say no gas cans have been fired right after we had just watched live gas cans being fired on protesters. And we were thinking, like, this is bizarre. How can they be promoting these lies as we're seeing it happen in real time? And of course, the whole plan was to create this stream of tweets from the Ottawa Police Service and then just get newscasts to back it up. So we can go to that clip actually there that I sent you, Justin, the first clip that I sent you with the female newscaster there. And we'll start with that because that's basically her making the claim about online disinformation and her backing up what the Ottawa police have been saying and challenging some of the news that's been going out there, especially from American media.
All right, let's take a listen.
Might take as long as a week to do.
Yeah, we heard the statement from the police chief earlier citing concerns about misinformation, disinformation circulating on social media. How would you describe, you know, what you're seeing online versus the reality there on the ground?
Yeah, there were some people alleging police brutality. I didn't see that. I did see people absolutely getting hit by batons and some rough arrests. Those were people who did not move back as the police line advanced. Sometimes they were on their knees, begging with officers, some veterans saying, please don't do this. But if you did not move when they told you to move, that was the fate that you suffered. There was no gas used. Nobody was shot. There was not mass arrests at gunpoints, despite what a New York Times headline appeared to report. And most importantly, no one died because there was a false report on American news that a woman was trampled by a horse yesterday. That did not happen. That was confirmed by both police and EMS. But the police chief did talk today about the problem they've had with misinformation and disinformation. This is what he had to say. Might take as long as a week to do.
Okay. So this is pretty incredible. I think probably the best thing to do would be to talk about some of these police tweets. Well, should we go to the police tweets, the New York Times article, or the woman getting trampled? Which one do we want to do first?
Well, if I can chime in real quick, I think the woman getting trampled might be a good place to start. And just to make
that video.
Yeah, I'll pull it up right now. Just to make it clear for context reasons. So what we just saw was the initial report of the media trying to say that none of this trampling happened.
Yeah, it's like by saying, oh, the false reporting about her dying was true, they made it seem like the whole thing was untrue. Like she didn't get trampled.
Right. I see. Right. Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to pull up that video. This is her. This is what did you call it? A First Nation?
Yes. She's part of the Mohawk tribe, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and play this.
Hold the line! Here comes the horses. Oh my goodness! Look what you did! Look what you did to her! Look what you did to her! Look what you did to her! You trampled on the lady who is inaccessible! Shame on you! Shame on every one of you! Shame on you!
So we have a report of the global news saying that this woman was not trampled when clearly she was trampled. No questions about it, right?
Yeah. And, I just sent you a photo if you want to show that. It's pretty startling. And this is the one that's been going viral. And this is the one that we'll address in terms of the police tweets.
They're saying,
oh, wow.
Photoshop.
So this photo is a pretty incredible shot. And the police are saying that this is a photoshopped image. Now, based on the video we all just saw, this is a clear depiction of that same woman on the side. You can see her walker, the walker that had the bag, right? She had the bag on top of something. It's very, very obvious that this could not have been doctored compared to the video, right?
Right.
So this is her after being trampled by the horses.
Wow.
A man being trampled as well.
Yeah, there's a man being trampled in the background also. So this is allegedly photoshopped according to the Ottawa police.
But we just saw a video of this woman in the jacket, just like it, wearing a black hat, just like it, who got trampled.
CGI.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's more videos. There's like multiple angles.
Yeah, there's other angles of the same event from other live streamers. So you have video footage from multiple angles and this overhead shot of this woman collapsed on the ground.
They could be dead right now. Like if things went a little differently.
Oh yeah, you kidding me? I mean, horses weigh like what, like 600, 700, 800,000 pounds, something like that.
Squashed them.
Yeah.
This is the even more interesting thing too with the New York Times, because the New York Times reporters are in Ottawa on site, so they are there. They're being accused of not being there by our journalists here, our mainstream media, some of them. But they reported also this horse trampling, and people again have lashed back and said horses like that are trained. They don't trample people. They'll never step on a person. And it's like just absurd. And these are, again, supposed to be our reputable journalists here and, funded journalists on top of it. And it's getting really out of hand with their lies. And now they're attacking their own left-wing, New York Times. It's like, how is the New York Times reporting the truth, and also with the other allegation of nobody's been arrested at gunpoint, which there's many images now of that as well. So
okay,
they're
so
just saying it's not true.
And there's a tweet here. We could pull up the Ottawa police tweets now. There's one that directly says, "Please note, no one has been seriously injured or passed away in any of today's police actions." Right. So, and you'll see it's translated into French as well. I think that's the third one that I sent you. Right there, Justin.
Might be. Yeah, here we go. Please note.
There we go. So no one has been seriously injured, right? This is the claim that woman did not get trampled by a horse. There were 0 serious injuries. Okay. Now
people kept freaking out, and of course, like flooding the Ottawa police Twitter, constantly going proof, shows proof, and people posting the videos and pictures on their Twitter repeatedly until they said, "We hear your concerns. We haven't heard anything. We're looking into it," sort of situation.
Thoughtful.
Yeah, thoughtful.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, my question is like, what if we have the New York Times reporting one thing and the global news and various other Canadian news outlets reporting something else? Was this intentional, or is this evidence that even within the this global network of deception, there's some kind of issue happening? Yeah, schism.
Breaking apart.
Yeah.
Good question.
It seems to me like they had a preset script, and they were like, "This is our narrative. We're going to tweet this. No matter what happens, then the news is going to back us up."
Right. Yeah, I think that's definitely how it goes. I mean, the other thing too is they shoot first and ask questions later. Like Trudeau acted as if he had these emergency powers, and now he's seeking to validate his emergency power status. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
And one of the other fake sort of spins the police put on it, and you see this, I think it's in the next tweet from the Ottawa police there. So they tried to say that a bicycle was thrown at a horse. Right? So this is where you'll see a lot of memes going on around now about the Ottawa police not knowing the difference between a walker and a bike.
Oh man.
Now, to be fair, I have seen a video since where there is a protester with a bike. He did not throw the bike, so if they're trying to stir something up, but there was someone with a bike when the horses rode by.
But you can see in the video the horses
both
passing.
Hands on the bike the entire time, and never has his hands off the bike. So
right.
No, this is what this came out around the time that everyone started sharing the woman getting trampled with the walker, and so what you have is that this was them scrambling with a fake narrative. It didn't work out. It didn't work out to try to say a bicycle got thrown under. Because too much evidence has come out. And so you see right there, Justin, I just sent you a link. And this is especially interesting too, because this really just, again, blows the lid off of all of this. So you have the Special Investigations Unit in Ottawa. And so, just like most police forces, right, you have the units that are working on investigating the police. So it says right here, a Special Investigations Unit investigating reported serious injury of woman in interaction with police horse, less lethal firearm discharges at Ottawa demonstrations. So they're investigating this woman being trampled and the discharging of firearms. And again, if you think back to that newscast, she said there was no firearms discharged. The woman did not get trampled. None of this happened. There was no arrests at gunpoint, even though, as we can see, there is an investigation ongoing into these things right now, despite what police and the news are saying.
Right. Wow. No kidding. Just total confusion. I mean, if you are somebody who doesn't know how to think for yourself, you are just like sucking your thumb right now. You can barely imagine what's happening.
Yes.
Seriously. Wow.
It's a tangled web.
So I think we should get into the New York Times piece, because this is really interesting to me, because it's fake news versus fake news.
It's like, the ultimate showdown. Who will win?
People are laughing going, what? Like, they turned on each other? Like, what is going on? Like, I'm really not expecting that.
So this is really interesting, right? You have the New York Times reporting on what's going on here, but it's not just reporting. It's photojournalism as well. So one of the interactions that occurred here was a fake news person here in Canada tried to call out this journalist, this New York Times journalist, saying, why don't you try reporting what's going on in your own country and not something that you have no presence, like no physical presence at? Then they got schooled on Twitter saying, no, actually, New York Times is in Ottawa. We took the photos.
Wow. No kidding.
So you have this big pushback from Canadian media that the Ottawa protesters cleared from Parliament encampment. This is the original story they ran with. As we saw in the clip there, she said there were no arrests at gunpoint. So let's get into some of the photos I sent you, Justin.
All right, so here's the Canada Land article.
Okay, so this is interesting. So after the New York Times article comes out, and this New York Times journalist takes all this heat from Canadian propaganda outlets, they essentially did this article with the Canada Land, with the Canada Land news outlet, saying that Canada is in some kind of weird denial. And so as you see, it says New York Times reporter stands by her account of gunpoint arrests in Ottawa. And the photos are right there, right?
Right, yeah.
These are being arrested at gunpoint. Now, the photos you're seeing right there, who was it again?
I can't remember his name. It's down in the article, but he is Indigenous, and he was there to protest, obviously, the mandates, but also to protest like the Indigenous children that had been murdered by the government and, you know, all that stuff. It was like, there is a sentiment there as well. And again, the woman who was also trampled, also Indigenous. So that, you know,
that squashes so many. It squashes
that
so many
narrative
things.
of, you know, if they were Indigenous, they would be roughed up even more.
Yeah, so like, let's scroll down. Like, look at this tweet here from Stephanie Carvin. It says, is the New York Times drunk? Where are the guns? Look, Ottawa police have not covered themselves in glory here, but what they are doing is not at gunpoint. Who is behind the wheel at New York Times Canada? So,
wow.
It's just so startling. So,
yet, for clarity, everybody, look at this. Here is a person literally getting arrested at gunpoint. Okay.
And you know what? And
there's a few.
And we sent you a bunch too in the Telegram. You know, we sent you a bunch of photos.
Other photos are from the Globe and Mail as well. They also have photos or published them. Multiple people at gunpoint.
Yeah,
so
we sent you. We sent you like 6 different photos.
Oh yeah, hold on. Let me pull that up here real quick.
The evidence is pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry.
This is again. So Ottawa police tweeted there has been no tear gas whatsoever, no gassing. Again, in that news clip we watched, she said there's been no gassing of any kind.
This particular photo was actually shot at a Rebel News reporter.
Yes.
So that also is evidence. She has injuries.
She has a
being
pending
shot
court
at
case.
Point blank range.
Wow.
And it's also on video.
It's horrifying. So this journalist, she got shot in the leg, point blank with that cannon.
First she was pepper sprayed, then she was shot in the leg.
She has a huge bruise on her leg. She was screaming in horrible pain. Now, this is interesting because while you have an alternative news media outlet like Rebel News, is one of the only truthful media outlets in Canada, you have their reporter literally being attacked by the police and shot in the leg with a gas canister and pepper sprayed. At the same time, you have the fake news media saying it's not safe for them out there. Protesters keep screaming liar at us. And we have had to remove the news stickers from our vans so they don't know which outlet we're from.
Wow.
Maybe he's just laying down some ambiance with a little foggy.
Yeah, come on. Oh my God. Okay. So that's just one of the photos you sent me. Then we've got, I'm assuming this is just another version, but you can actually see the cannon fire out there.
And again, this is what the Special Investigations Unit is looking into, right? The discharging of non-lethal weapons that the police are actively tweeting don't exist, never happened.
And yet we have photo evidence right here.
So Simon, does it seem like there is an effort in the Canadian government to try to get to the bottom of all this and maybe bring some kind of justice?
It's sparse right now, to be honest. You don't have a lot of opposition, which is why his Emergencies Act is getting pushed through.
Yeah.
You know, there's deep concern here that Trudeau has enough influence within the current governmental structure that they're not going to go against him. You know, yeah, there we go. We have someone else being arrested at gunpoint here, a trucker.
A lot of them were sleeping, so they like smashed the windows, and like, again, no weapons charges, no weapons found, because there was allegations of like, oh, they have guns, and check every trucker's truck for guns, and none of that is obviously true.
Right,
so,
right.
It's going to be really interesting when this happens here. Where they're in states like Texas, where everybody has a gun.
God, yeah,
you try to bust.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're.
Yeah, this is what I was saying to Amanda, that if they try to do this to a lot of the Americans, it's just going to be all out warfare.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of the game is intimidation. They want to intimidate. The reason they're being so harsh is they want to send a message to anybody who's sympathetic, hey, you better stay home and not get involved. But, you know, this is something that was beautifully depicted in the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson. You know, we have this kind of overly flowery idea of what the Revolutionary War and other wars for freedom are like, where it's like, yeah, the guys go in and they fight, but everybody's safe at home and all that. That's not the case at all. And when you're going up against tyranny and you actually want to win, you have to be willing to risk and lose everything. People need to be willing to risk their comfort, their safety, their jobs, their bank accounts, even their own lives and the lives of the people that they know and love, if we really want to have freedom.
Get some skin in the game.
Exactly. Now, we don't want to be cavalier. You don't want to poke the bear. You don't want to be, you don't want to use bad tactics and bad strategic planning. But we need, if we really care about making this world a better place, we need to put some skin in the game. And that's why I think this whole freedom convoy thing is just so awesome, because these people did do that to a certain extent. So anyway, okay. So here a clear indication that the police are lying. Let me see if I can find that.
Yeah, you can go through some of the tweets now too.
Police find prevent escalation further. Injury mounted officers sent to create critical space between the police line and protesters. So it's almost like they're trying to explain, you know, look, this is all just for safety right here.
Yeah, this is why someone got trampled by a horse.
Yeah.
For your safety.
Protesters, we told you to leave. We gave you time to leave. We were slow and methodical, yet you were assaultive and aggressive with officers and the horses. Based on your behavior, we are responding, including helmets and batons for our safety. So
again, all projection.
All projected. And this is carefully crafted language here. Mind you, this is getting posted on an official Twitter account where thousands of people are ostensibly watching, trying to figure out the official narrative. And they're painting the situation in a way that justifies their actions. So it's...
Yeah. And I got to say, you know, being conspiratorially minded, I'm going through some of the responses and I'm seeing like really low level accounts, some of them with no photo, looking, you know, kind of sketchy. And they're like, wow, Ottawa police tweeting about this in real time is so helpful. Thank you. What great communications. Whoever's idea this was, what a great idea. And I'm like, okay, so are there police with fake accounts on Twitter backing up this narrative? Like, what's really going on here, you know?
Precisely. Can you say bot?
Unbelievable.
Let's see. In this other one, protesters have put children between police operations and unlawful protest site. The children will be brought to the place, to a place of safety. What?
Another threat. Yeah, another threat to take away your children. Again, there was no evidence of this. There was no evidence of children.
No charges, because they also threatened to charge you $5,000 if you brought a kid under 18 to the site. And as far as I know, nobody's reported any charges for having kids there.
Wow. Spear tactic.
And we should also remember that there was like an award-winning photo that got taken during the Black Lives Matter protests that was literally of a small child standing in front of police, like throwing like a gas can or something. It was like right after there was tear gas or something like that. It was in the midst of the chaos, basically. It was a child
with a mask, with his fist in the air, standing in front of riot police on the front line.
The perfect propaganda thing.
One of the most proud moments of 2020. And you're like, this child is like, how is that different?
It's the exact same thing.
That was mostly peaceful.
Yeah, that was mostly peaceful. Come on.
It did say that in the article, so I believed it.
Yeah, so you'll see Ottawa police also said they're seeking to combat misinformation about the protests and police actions. Yep.
So, this is from another newspaper, the Toronto Star, which, again, the narrative they're pushing.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, an accusation, you know, what are they suggesting here? Well, based on the credibility of the police, which has already been demonstrated as 100% flawless, the mere accusation of doctoring is enough to conclude it was absolutely doctored. You know?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
These tweets are pretty crazy. Like,
yeah. Do you have these you probably posted these in your Telegram, I imagine, right? Something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, some of it is in there for sure.
Okay. I'll make sure it's up on a place so you guys can see it in the description. Everybody's watching, so.
Yeah, and I can definitely make sure everything from today is in my Telegram. So actually, in the order that we're sort of looking at it would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think there's one that's I think 3 different tweets from the Ottawa police. There it is. Yeah. Police did not use gas on protesters yesterday. They have not used gas on protesters today. As we saw, there's plenty of photos. There's also live footage of this. They're saying this idea that protesters are launching gas at police.
What?
It's absurd.
Like, what are they talking about? What?
I know. And there's no videos. Everyone on the tweets are like, prove it, prove it, prove it, except for, of course, the trolls who are.
Good. Right. Yeah.
But no one's buying it for the most part. They're just like, where's the proof? There's cameras everywhere. There's footage everywhere. People are not going anywhere. Another threat was like, if you're a protester, don't go anywhere without a live stream. Cops were allegedly also attacking live streamers, knocking phones out of their hands.
Oh, no, worse than that. So the night after the first police crackdown, protesters went back to partying. So the police presence subdued. They went back to like a full party in the streets of Ottawa. They set off fireworks. They kept celebrating. And here's what the police were doing. They got rubber bullets and they started sniping people's phones down to stop their live streaming.
Whoa.
And there's also many people now with injuries of rubber bullets showing up online as well.
Yeah. So they were basically snipering the crowd. If people had like their phone up on a selfie stick, they were shooting it down.
Wow. No.
So again, you see how reactive they are, how scared they are of people seeing footage that the protest is still strong, that people are still free, that they're not scared, that they're celebrating, that there's a sense of love. There's another video I shared on my Instagram today of people chanting, "We love you" to the police, and it's met by a loud explosion of some kind of weapon. That everyone, it breaks up the "We love you" chants and people scream in fear. So you have this dark contrast going on that it keeps getting more startling, to be honest.
It seems like as more of this stuff happens, like more people are coming around, but no one's going back. So at some point, it's just going to be like critical mass.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. I mean, it's a tipping point. It's a situation where, and the people that know how to pull this stuff off do it well. They build up tension and consternation, which they've been doing for the past 2 years. And then they want to release that tension in a way that causes greater investment in the globalist agenda. But the Freedom Convoy they've released it in a different way. They released it in a way that caused an investment in patriotism, investment in calling out the fake news media. And that's not something that they can abide. And, the fact that they're working so hard to shoot rubber bullets out of people's phones, out of people's hands, suggests that the real enemy here is not the Freedom Convoy, it's the narrative. That's what they're trying to stop.
It's interesting. The president of El Salvador said the real war isn't in Ukraine, it's in Canada. So even other China
state media tweeted criticizing Trudeau, saying he's doing things they can't even do.
Wow, really?
Like, we can't treat Hong Kong protesters like this even.
Yeah.
Wow. No kidding. Yeah. Well, sure they can. It's Tiananmen Square. But anyway.
I know. It's like, well, it is a political game, I know. But.
So now you have, there's of course a fracturing, right, of this intense attack on this movement. So now you have a number of the Convoy protesters who've been arrested. One of them is still in prison as far as we know. So she's still being held. Others have been released with just mischief charges, very minor charges, things that, again, they don't amount to treason or insurrection or sedition or any of the things that the media keeps saying or any of the things that Trudeau keeps saying. There was a press conference held by one of the organizers of the convoy recently, and he has stated that them as a group, as an organization, they have decided to peacefully withdraw for now and regroup and decide what they're going to do next, basically saying we're not going to be punching bags for the police. We're going to pull out. At the time that he made that statement, I believe it was yesterday.
Yeah.
He had reached out to the police saying, we want to remove the majority of our trucks, but we can't because you've erected barriers and stolen all our gas. So at the time of his press conference, he had been given no response from any police on the offer to withdraw the trucks.
Wow.
So you still had the police cracking down on these protesters and maintaining a police, basically like a little police state in Ottawa, even as the truckers were offering to get the trucks out of there. So at this point, I think there has been some movement on that. But at the same time, what he said was, we are not speaking for the protesters. We're not speaking for anyone. If there are protesters that are still holding the line, who feel the need to stay there, that's really up to each individual. But the Freedom Convoy itself has stated a peaceful withdrawal and said they're going to regroup and form a new plan at this point.
Wow.
Maybe they'll join the People's Convoy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's they can get across the border.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the fact that the police aren't interested in accepting this offer, you know, you would think if it was all about just restoring normalcy back to Ottawa, you would take the offer. You'd be like, oh, great. Let's work with these guys. Let's get everybody out so we can get back to normal and stop this insanity. Maybe. Instead, they're not doing anything, and they're just leaving them there because they want to act as a prop in this propaganda narrative campaign.
Yeah, it's like they're like, wait, bucko, we got to make an example out of you first.
Yeah, exactly. Ridiculous.
Exactly. Well, and you have the CBC, which is the state media, right? So they receive the majority of the funding out of all the different propaganda outlets here in Canada. The CBC receives the majority of the funding from the government. And of course, they were feeding Trudeau questions, on a platter that support his narrative. One of the ones that they asked him today was, well, what are we going to do in 5 or 6 months if these truckers try again? I mean, won't we need the emergency order then? And of course, his response is, yes, obviously this is something we're thinking about. This is something we're discussing, that there could be future issues. And so, we will not keep the emergency order a day longer than we need to, but we do have to keep Canadians safe. And this is an ongoing threat and an ongoing emergency. Even though the blockades and the trucks have been removed, the emergency remains.
Right. Wow. No kidding. Yeah, well, no surprise. If you look at any tyrannical regime throughout history, especially the modern ones where they sell tyranny to the people, it's basically the same narrative. We have to do it for the safety and protection of the people, et cetera, et cetera. So, so one last question as we start to wind down here. We saw, I think it was last week, we saw all these provinces and parts of Canada start to remove these vaccine mandates. Is that actually true, or do you think there's another play happening here?
It's a mixed bag. Definitely, it was the convoy having an impact. You're really having politicians panic and say, okay, we'll start to lift things 100%. And one of the ways you know this is that almost every one of them had to finish their statement with, it's not because of the truckers, though.
Yeah.
All of them, right? And so here in Ontario, you had the Premier, Doug Ford, who has really just been kind of like a spineless mouthpiece for the whole pandemic operation. And shockingly, he shared what looked like actual true words and thoughts that were his own, saying these vaccine passports are dividing Canadians. He's like, I personally know hundreds of unvaccinated people that can no longer get into restaurants, that can't go anywhere. He's like, I have people in my own family who, this has created a division in my own family. So these passports are ruining relationships. They're not good for Canada. And frankly, we really want them to be gone. So he's claiming that on March 1st, he's going to be lifting the passport system. We'll see. We've already seen articles. Today, we saw an article saying that, rising cases might make the lifting complicated or something along those lines. They could spin it at any time. The other element of this is that the state of emergency that they declared for COVID, that gives them the power to enforce mandates and passports at any time. There's been zero talk of lifting those emergency powers. So sure, they may lift the passport for a while, but for example, in Alberta, they did lift the passport system, and they even took away masking children with the caveat that they can add either of those back in at any time according to any change in cases or hospitalizations. So it looks like what is sort of an initial sort of, again, like you were saying, Justin, a letting off of steam, of letting people have the feeling that something is happening, but really not releasing any power. And so what we need to see is the lifting of the emergency powers that allow them to do this in a totally undemocratic way. And even with that being said, we've heard politicians here in Ontario stating that they want to create some permanent laws that would allow them to do this anytime anyways.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if there's an election year coming up in Canada this year, like we have in the US, but the total global coordination with, at least with some countries, of the backing off of these vaccine mandates and various other COVID restrictions, in my mind, leads me to believe that this is a coordinated aspects to a much greater agenda. You encroach, you get people basically to the point where they can't take anymore. Then they're like, right as they're about to get up and grab their pitchfork and start making change happen, you give them a little breathing room and they're like, oh, thank God I don't have to ruin my life. And then they just keep the encroachment train rolling. So,
well, hopefully this whole thing has activated enough regular Canadians to just get involved in their government locally.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it doesn't help that the UK and other places are lifting restrictions in such a large scale while 90% of Canadians allegedly are vaccinated, right? So we're supposed to be one of the most vaccinated countries in the world. There's huge compliance here in Canada. And yet we've had some of the strictest, longest lockdowns in the world. And so, you know, it's not following any kind of science or logic. We are an anomaly in the world. It's in fact probably one of the reasons why Canadians woke up. So, you know, you look at that comparison between America and Canada. Well, you know, I think one of the reasons Canadians stepped up is because we were being abused much more as a nation than Americans were. In America, you have still pockets of freedom, places that almost didn't lock down at all. Whereas in Canada, they went hard across the nation for long periods of time, and they've been unrelenting. And
yeah, and I also think too, like, again, like people say Canadians are like very, you know, forgiving, and, you know, they're like, I'll just do it to get through it. Again, many friends and family were just like, fine, I'll just get both vaccines and then we'll go back to normal, right? And so I think there's a betrayal where it was like, I'm a good Canadian, I'll just do it. And then now they're realizing it's a different situation. So there's like a feeling to me of betrayal that's super deep to people who are like, I got 2 vaccines and now I can't go out and have this life.
So. I think Jordan Peterson is one of the best examples of that, right? Yeah. Jordan Peterson was, you know, he was pro-vaccine. He got his 2 doses and then he didn't get his freedoms back. And, you know, I think the quote from him was "stupid me."
Yeah.
You know, and he realized he got duped. And I really think he represents a lot of Canadians. He's speaking out very strongly against all this right now. So I'm sure he'll be kicked off Twitter soon.
Right.
But, you know, there is a really growing movement now here. Of course, we know this movement is around the world, and having the support from around the world is huge. Yeah. I think that I know that's psychologically really helpful, because Trudeau is not going to give up. It's not in his psychological makeup to say I'm sorry or backtrack in any way. So unless he is removed from power, I don't really see how he's going to move in the other direction. He's comfortable being a tyrant. He's not worried about being seen poorly in the eyes of the world. We noticed that in his last election campaign when he started going crazy, and you know, he would get questions from the media like, there are some people who aren't vaccinated, not because they're anti-science or not because they're conspiratorial, but because they have genuine health issues, or they don't have the right information, or they're just scared and they don't know what to do. What do you have to say to those Canadians who you're cutting out of society? And his response was, my message is the same as it has been. It's time to get vaccinated. And that's it. And that's it.
Yeah.
Robot.
It's a total mouthpiece for Klaus Schwab, you know?
Yeah.
And Klaus Schwab being brought up in Parliament, you know, this is a really big change. In that National Post journalist who lives in Ottawa, who got red-pilled by seeing the media and then walking in her own city, she just recently penned an article on Chrystia Freeland, who is
Deputy Prime Minister and Deputy of Finance.
Yeah, one of the most powerful politicians.
Yeah.
She is one of the leaders of the World Economic Forum. She has a very high position there. And so she just penned an article for the National Post, this mainstream Canadian news outlet, on why her position at the World Economic Forum is a danger to Canadian democracy. So you see how quickly it's red-pilling people who were previously working for outlets that were very, very pro-COVID narrative, that were very much left-wing news outlets. And so that kind of flipping, I think, is indicative of something broader that's occurring. So that's what Trudeau is up against.
And it's interesting that all of these Fidel Castro memes are coming back like in mass. It used to be just like a little, you know, more conspiratorial thing, and now it's like you can't get away from it. They're everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, it's really interesting. There's a great Medium article on this that I have in my Telegram, and it really goes through the evidence for that, because it is pretty strong evidence that the possibility of it being his father. Photos aside, they were in that area at the time of conception. They were visiting Castro at the time of conception. There's lots of info to point to the fact that Pierre Trudeau could not bear children. But really, at the end of the day, as far as communism goes, it doesn't really matter which one is his father, because Pierre Trudeau loved communism.
Yeah.
He toured China. He wrote a book praising China. He was good buddies with Fidel Castro. So whether Justin Trudeau's father is Castro or is Pierre Trudeau, they were all rampant communists anyway in the end. So you know, like, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He was surrounded by this regardless, even if his biological father is someone different. He was surrounded by two men that loved and promoted communism their entire careers.
Right.
Maybe if he was Pierre's kid, he'd have a better sense of humor about all this.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, you know, a rose by any other name is still a communist, right? So
there you go.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
I mean, I think as frustrating as all this is a major tipping point. I do think that the MO appears to be, you're going to have a point man, you're going to have a scapegoat, which is Trudeau, that he's going to push the narrative as hard as he possibly can. And then when the people finally get sick of him, he'll resign through some scandal, and the people will be like, oh, finally, all the craziness is over. No, they just switched out another puppet, and now there's going to be another puppet or another person in place who's going to be pushing the same agenda. So the hope I have is that all of the duplicity with the media and the government and everything like that, the fact that people could walk out of their own houses and see the truth with their own eyes and then speak with their mouths to other people that they know and kind of create this organic news network is hopefully going to inoculate the people to the propaganda, so that hopefully we have a kind of herd immunity to BS forming here with respect to Canada and other places that will hopefully take a global position. So
yeah, I've had all
I think we have them on their heels. You know, I think we have them on their heels, despite all the preparation that they have and the power that they have. You know, you look at there's some theories out there saying that Trump's Operation Warp Speed was to rush the vaccine, so they had to rush their entire operation. And you know, I've thought about that a few times in terms of where this is at, and if, you know, even though this seems to be playing into their hand, if a lot of this is the same thing, that they're being forced to rush forward at a pace that does not allow the kind of gradual psychological conditioning that they were hoping for over a much longer period of time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I would say there's something like that going on, where even though these are the operations we knew they had, they're reactive, they're on their heels. And, you know, that's going to be our victory in the end. I think that's what it looks like, you know, is going to help us win.
Agreed. Yeah, the truth always wins in the end, even if there's a little muck and dirt on the ground before we get there. So
we will win.
That's right.
Amen, brother.
Well, hey, Simon, thank you so much for everything you shared. Tell us, where can we find your social media and all the stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, so please come follow me on Telegram. You can look up Simon Esler on Telegram, and that's where I'm the least censored. I am heavily Shadowbanned on Instagram and Twitter, but I am still active on there. So if you can find me on Instagram, you have Simon Esler 1111 and Simon Esler 2.0. So I'm on there. You know, I really try to hold down on there because there's so many people that are still stuck in the narrative there. So I really need to stay on the battlefield as long as possible.
Your Instagram is great, by the way.
What's that?
Your Instagram is great, by the way.
Oh, thank you kindly. Yeah. I work pretty hard on it, despite the censorship. I'm like, whatever. And then you should check out my free thought shop. I have a series right now called Communism Will Fail. You can get shirts that the design is essentially communism in Canada will fail, communism in America will fail. And this is a big message that, you know, I feel strongly in promoting, because I think we really need to stand behind this notion that it is going to fail. It's not going to work out. You can check out my comedy special, my 60-minute comedy special, Theorize About Conspiracies, on Rise TV. There is a trailer for that on my YouTube channel. And in that trailer, there's a link for 3 free days on Rise TV, so you can watch the special regardless. And Amanda, you have your Instagram as well.
Yeah, there's always my Instagram as well at Good Resonance. Mostly I'm on there, again, like stories and updates and essential oils and unschooling and just life. It's really what goes on in life.
Awesome.
Important stuff.
Yeah, we'll have all of, just send me all the links when we're done, and I'll make sure they're all in the description for people. So yeah, well, hey, thanks so much, guys. Stay safe up there. Be careful. Definitely keep speaking the truth, but don't sacrifice yourself as much as you reasonably can. And
I'll let you know if our bank accounts get frozen.
Yeah, exactly. Well, with that, maybe we'll touch base here in a few weeks to see what's going on. And obviously, be sure to check everybody's social media that we'll post in the description of this video. So thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you next time on Vigilant News. Take care.